this was, I think, posted yesterday, that apparently the 49ers are at this point deciding over Mac Jones and Trey Lance. Now, I'm a little bit surprised Justin Fields isn't in the conversation. We talked about this about a week ago, I want to say, where I put Justin Fields as the number 2 quarterback in this draft. I think he is just so athletic, so talented, and, there's just so much about him to like. I'm a little confused as to how he slipped so hard. I guess it just has to do with how the teams are evaluating. And, I was reading about just the arguments for some of the other quarterbacks to maybe grasp a better understanding of it all. Zach Wilson had a fantastic year this past season. He's rated per PFF. He had the highest grade for a quarterback. So, there's strong arguments for why, there's kind of a switch up going on right now. I know the 49ers are enamored at the athleticism that Trey Lance brings, but then also the ability to just memorize a playbook. That people were talking about the photographic memory of Mac Jones. It's all starting to make sense as to why he may or may not have slipped. The epilepsy thing got brought up with Justin Fields last week. I'm assuming that, I don't think it should, but I'm assuming it may hurt his draft stock a little bit. I don't think personally it should, but I could see it maybe potentially affecting that as well. And it just seems like more and more is coming out through the quarterback evaluation process about quarterbacks like Mac Jones and Trey Lance that, for so long, Justin Fields was the number 2 guy, but now, he's looking at potentially being the number 4 or 5 guy out of the top 5 prospects. So I was doing a little bit of digging because I wanted to really kind of figure this all out. And I have some quotes for you guys that I can read out. It kind of shapes and gives you a better understanding as to why. And then I'll kind of break down the 2 quarterbacks that they're interested in. And, we can kind of make sense of what's going on here. So Kyle Shanahan, specifically himself, and this is all per Ian Rappaport, what he brought up the whole 49ers looking at Jones and Trey Lance, and this is kind of where the whole thing started. Kyle Shanahan actually asked specifically that Trey Lance work with quarterback John Beck. Now, he's been training Trey Lance for a handful of months now. For those of you that are not aware of what happened, essentially, Trey Lance played 1 game in the fall for North Dakota State and then stepped away to get himself ready for the draft itself, and he's been working with John Beck. Now, these are quotes from John Beck specifically coming out of a KNBR interview where, just these are some of the bits that I pulled out that I thought were really interesting, that I felt, really kind of explained everything here and gave us a good understanding of why they're singling out these 2 quarterbacks for their choice. So the first quote, Kyle wants somebody that can understand his offense, that can process information quickly, that can see the field through a lens that makes sense for him to be able to coach and for you to have to see it how he sees it. So that right there just screams Mac Jones to me, and that seems like a, photographic memory. That was one of the things that got brought up. He had a very strong understanding of the Alabama playbook, and some people attribute part of his success to just how well of an understanding he had of the playbook. So, right there, immediately as I read that, I was like, oh, okay, so that Mac Jones kind of hits that nail right on the head right there. Then he goes on. Another quote, he's really particular about the feet of his quarterback, the eyes of his quarterback's positioning, and he looks for traits and abilities. And then a little bit of a longer one here. He's looking for an athletic quarterback. I think, anybody with athleticism would fit. Kyle doesn't need a Lamar Jackson athlete. He needs somebody athletic enough to run the keeper game, to be able to move off the spot, and then in the play pass game to be able to move enough selling the actions, and if there is any pressure, quickly move and still be able to drive every single throw to all levels of the field. So that right there screams Trey Lance, somebody who's athletic, has a cannon of an arm, can throw on the run. And it's funny because when you read those 2 things, it's like it hits on strengths of the quarterback and then weaknesses of the other. So that first quote, just the understanding of what the coach wants, the playbook, the system type thing that he's looking for, you get that from Mac Jones. And then when you're talking about the athleticism, the quarterback that can, if a play breaks down, move around a little bbit and still be able to fire the football, and run that offense he's looking to run, that screams Trey Lance. Then when we go further into kind of the breakdown here, I pulled the numbers and just kind of some of the evaluation things that I've seen off of them. When you look at Mac Jones, somebody who's smart, he's accurate, even under pressure, still has the accuracy. He had a 77.4% completion percentage last year. That's crazy. Almost 80%. Almost, not quite, but almost there. That's nuts. He had the best completion percentage within 10 yards in the entire country for all quarterbacks ranked. And then on top of that, the photographic memory thing that everyone keeps talking about that they seem to be enamored with after he had some conversations with coaches and staff that were interviewing him during his pro days. Then when you flip it over to Trey Lance, The guy had 28. He didn't play this past season. Great. He played one game. But the season prior, 28 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He had a solid 66.9%, so 67% completion percentage. This is all 2019 numbers. He didn't play a season this past year. He has all the physical traits you'd want in a quarterback. The 6'4", 224 pounds, but he can still move around. On top of that, athletic cannon of an arm. He's a great decision maker. His accuracy was very, not the worst, not the best, but a very solid, very strong decision maker, especially when things break down. And also the big thing, not being afraid to push the football down the field. When you think of how people talked about quarterbacks, when you look at somebody like Tua Tagovailoa, a lot of people criticize him for being afraid to push the football down the field. That's something that, quarterbacks have a hard time adjusting with, is windows that do and don't look open compared to how they looked in college when they get into the NFL. That was something that Tua has been criticized a lot for. So somebody that's not afraid to attack the football down the field, maybe throw into those coverages that, don't look open when you're in college, but they're open in the NFL because the athletes catching the ball are just so much better. So when you look at this, it makes a lot of sense why they're targeting these two guys specifically. I think Justin Fields fits some of the things that they're looking for here. It's unfortunate that kind of like tailspin his draft stock has gone, which isn't massive. It's not like a huge thing, but it's enough that it's dropping him into almost like the 4 or 5 position now of these quarterbacks. I can kind of get a better understanding, though, breaking some of that stuff down as to why they're singling out Mac Jones and Trey Lance as their two guys. Now, is there a possibility that they just flipped the script and this was all BS and they're literally going to take Justin Fields with the number 3 pick? Like, of course that could be the thing. The way I see it is, all 5 of these top 5 QBs that everyone's kind of stressing over and looking at here, I think are legitimate guys with legitimate opportunity to be successful in the NFL. It's ultimately going to boil down to being in the right system with the right staff, with the right players around them. That's going to be the boiling point for it all. I mean, for all we know, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but for all we know, Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 guy, could be a complete bust and be gone out of the league in 3 years. And the rest of these 4 guys could have been the guy that you should have went for. You never know in the NFL. You think back of past number 1 quarterbacks. Ryan Leaf is one of them, kind of, big bust. He went number 2, not number 1, but number 2, still a really high pick guy. That same draft Manning came out of, obviously didn't amount to much in the NFL. Someone like Jamarcus Russell, who was like a complete flop and whiff. Somebody who went over Calvin Johnson in that same draft. Like, unbelievable when you say something like that out loud. So you never know how this is going to work out, but after kind of, dissecting this a little bit and really looking at it, I can understand more as to why the 49ers are targeting Trey Lance or Mac Jones. If I was to pick one of the two myself personally, I think the best fit for what the 49ers want is going to be Mac Jones. And this isn't a knock to Trey Lance, but my biggest kind of like pointer for this is that before the 49ers landed Jimmy Garoppolo, they were really, really looking to try to pull in Kirk Cousins before he ended up signing that like 3-year completely guaranteed deal with Minnesota. And Kirk Cousins was kind of like the ideal system QB that Kyle Shanahan was looking for. This is very well noted, and everyone knows this. So when you look at like the physical traits, like Mac Jones, not necessarily the most athletically gifted and physically, present guy that you'd see, but he's a system guy. He's very accurate. Everyone knocks him for being in such a good system at Alabama, but like that kind of translates. You're in a fantastic system going to the NFL. If you're going to a fantastic system from there, you have the experience of a somewhat pro style. I feel like Mac Jones fits a little bit better with what Kyle Shanahan might be looking for. But honestly, there is so much upside with Trey Lance. You have a small sample size of what he can do, but he was impressive. It could go either way. I think Mac Jones might be a slightly better fit just based off of Kyle Shanahan's past quarterbacks and kind of what he was looking for prior to Jimmy G on the 49ers. And that's just kind of how I look at the whole thing.